My name is John Passfield, and I'm going to read from my novel, John Passfield's Saturday Morning. The title of this reading will be Saturday Morning, Video 9, A Theory of Writing. Well, here's the cover. John Passfield's Saturday Morning, two kids on a white roadster, 1960 Austin Hilly Sprite, a novel by John Passfield. So the John Passfield at the top is myself as a 21-year-old would-be writer. The John Passfield at the bottom is me. Last year I was 75, a 75-year-old writer. Here's the summary on the back of the novel. A 21-year-old would-be writer, John Passfield, spends his last few months as a garbage collector on the streets of his hometown, St. Thomas, Ontario, Canada, in the summer of Canada's centennial year, 1967. As he works, he compares the imagery of his own life so far and of his upcoming marriage and pending career as a high school teacher to the imagery of the great books that he's reading, all while in pursuit of building the perfect load of garbage. Well, the garbage truck rolls along the curb. The young would-be writer empties the cans of garbage and thinks about his desired future writing career. Now, the topic is a theory of writing. There is one image unit of this topic, a theory of writing, in each of the 16 chapters of the novel. Now, here are the page numbers: 5, 14, 24, 34, 42. So the theory of writing is only about a sentence or two each time he thinks of it, and they're spaced about 10 pages apart in terms of his thoughts. So the point is that imagery comments on imagery. So here you have images in his mind, in a layer of his mind, about a theory of writing that he's trying to develop. But everything else in his mind is commenting on this. So I'm not going to read those commenting images today, but keep in mind that there's more to this thought than just what I'm reading as we do this video. So page 5 is the first reference to this topic. Here's what he's thinking as he's emptying garbage cans in the back of a truck. What makes the great books great? Why do the great books achieve greatness while the shallow books remain shallow? How can this be when every one of these books is about the lives that we humans all lead? So it's a mystery story, a detective story. It's an idea that he's searching for, trying to figure out. We go to page 14, which, as I say, is about 10 pages of thought later on many other topics. These critical books that I've been reading lately, books by Ellis Fermer, Pryor, and Clement, these books are trying to tell me something that I need to know. Now, this book hasn't been out very long, but a person who read it said, well, I don't know these authors you're writing about in your novel. And I said, well, forget that. Just think of the authors that you read and find interesting and think are telling you something, appealing to something in you, and you ask yourself, well, what is it? What is it in Stephen King, Margaret Atwood, or the writers that you read that are appealing to you? Can you figure out sort of what the point is that makes these books more interesting to you than other books? So the surface might be Pryor and Ellis Fermer, but the depth is young person reading books, wondering why certain books appeal. Well, that was page 14. Let's go to page 24 in pursuit of this mystery of what books mean to this person. Page 24. There's something that all of my reading is trying to tell me, something about the books that I would like to write. But all I have at present is a very, very vague idea. So, page 34, we're jumping 10 more pages of many, many thoughts in the mind of this main character. I never thought about what a story is or what it does when I was in high school. So, thinking about books now in a way I never did before. 42, again jumping about 10 pages of thought. That Shakespeare was born a poet, but taught himself how to write his plays. That seems to be Clement's central point. So Clement, a commentator. Shakespeare wrote at least 20 of his plays before he knew. So an interesting thought that Shakespeare had to teach himself to be Shakespeare the writer. And when we think of his great plays, the great tragedies, he didn't write those off the bat, as it were. He had to teach himself what a Shakespeare play could be, and then he was able to write a Shakespeare play. So this kind of intrigues this young 21-year-old would-be writer. Page 50, again, leaping ahead. Just another increment. These are incremental thoughts, just little movements forward, inch by inch, in the thinking. Why does every reader feel that he's Hamlet? Why does the viewer see himself when he watches that play? What did Shakespeare know that very few writers seem to know? So many characters are written, and they're interesting while you're reading the book, but you let it go at that. Others, like Hamlet, or if you're female, it might be Cleopatra or Juliet. Like, these characters are so intriguing, they're so appealing, over centuries even, to people. Why is that? What makes these characters different? 60 for the next installment. Why does the story of Gatsby and Daisy have such resonance, while other stories of gangsters simply do not? Did Fitzgerald know what he was writing, or was it just a lucky guess, a leap in the dark? So who knows how many hundreds or thousands of gangster stories set in the 1920s, and yet The Great Gatsby is a gangster story set in the 1920s that people read in many generations now since it was written. It's 100 years ago, 1925, 26, and this is 2021. Why that gangster story? What is it about that book that has resonance, that sort of reaches out to people when other gangster stories don't? We go from 60 to 68. Load every rift of your subject with ore. What subject? What rift? What ore? Is there a way to figure out what all of this means? So you read these interesting quotes and they're intriguing. This is a famous quote, load every rift of your subject with ore. Young John Keats wrote that to Shelley, an older poet. And Shelley was a little miffed. He was 5 years older than Keats and had been writing longer. And hey, don't tell me how to write. I'll be giving you advice. But it's an imagery. Load every rift of your subject with ore. Well, that's good advice. But what did it mean to Shelley? What did it mean to Keats, who wrote it? What does it mean to me? You're trying to figure out these things as you're becoming a writer, or hopefully becoming a writer. 78. Here we are. Sometimes hard to find these. So Shakespeare wrote poetic plays. For 300 years afterwards, people wrote poetic plays. You can travel the world and not find one on any stage. So writers write to form, or forms plural. Shakespeare wrote to the form of the poetic play. Well, okay, for 300 years we'll imitate Shakespeare's form. But it didn't work. You can't just imitate other writers. Stephen King, oh yeah, I enjoy his novels. Oh, you can write like Stephen King? Well, he had to figure out how to write like Stephen King. Maybe you have to figure out how to write like yourself. You can't just imitate forms or they become hollow. That's kind of what he's getting at, but he's not quite sure what it is he's getting at. 86. So everything at a certain stage in your search for the answer to a question is kind of hints, that you're trying to figure out. Why do some novels shine so brightly and some fade away? What is the difference between Wuthering Heights and The Woman in White? Does science tell us that for every door there is a key? Well, if you could find the key that would open the door that would tell you the difference between Wuthering Heights, a Gothic novel from the 19th century, and The Woman in White, a Gothic novel from the 19th century, why has one lasted for over a century and a half, I guess now? And the other one, is interesting, but it doesn't have that same appeal to people. What is it? What's going on here? Okay, then we go to 104, 96, I guess I haven't done. Page 96. All lives have a surface. All lives have their depths. Why do some writers fish on the surface, while others go deep. So, like, what is the difference here? 104. But why is it that people say that they can tell what Hamlet is thinking, even though they can't see into his head? So some kind of sense here that the characters that are all on the page, captured in words, lose interest after a while. But the characters that aren't really written down, something's written on the page, but what you do is you think thoughts in your mind that aren't on the page, and that becomes the character for you. That seems to be what these compelling, these interesting characters are all about. You have thoughts in your mind as a response to what's on the page, rather than just memorizing what's on the page. So he's moving forward in his thoughts, incrementally, but still moving forward, I think. 114. Why do some Canadian writers move to England? Why do some Canadian writers stay at home? What for each would be the icing? What the cake? So this is 1967, and there were Canadian writers who did go to the States or England to become a writer. Earlier, Hemingway went to Europe, France, Spain to become a writer. Earlier than that, T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound, Bernard Shaw, Henry James went to London, England to become a writer. Do I leave Canada or I stay at home? Do I go to the big city, Toronto maybe, to become a writer or stay at home? All these are questions. There's no real answers at this point in this man's life. This man, myself, at 21 years old. 122 for the next increment of thought here. Skipping again 10 pages of other thoughts. What is meant by an objective correlative? What is meant by delayed decoding? What is meant by the preconscious mind? Well, those words are on the surface of this novel, but deeper down, like what are some of these terms you read? If you read a writing manual or read some criticism, like do I need to know this? Do writers actually work from these definitions? Climax, crisis, denouement, and so on. Like what do I need to know to be a writer? 114 we go to. Whoops. Getting mixed up here, maybe. Oh, no, I've done that. Okay, sorry, I slept. 122. No, 122 I've done. 132. Sorry to get mixed up. But we'll sort it out. 132. What in the world is umbrella imagery? Can a soliloquy be written today? Is anyone able today to write a poetic play? Well, forms do become dated, eh? Soliloquies, well, a little old-fashioned nowadays. You wouldn't write in that form. Poetic play, well, a little old-fashioned too. Nobody seems to be able to figure out how to do that today. Then what are the forms that one would write in order to fulfill one's own promise as a writer? That's the point there. And lastly, 140. We'll see if the problem is solved in the last chapter. 140. All of these thoughts whirl around in my mind. What is literature? What is it not? Easier to read a book than to write one any day. So interesting that at the end of the novel, the 21-year-old would-be writer still doesn't really know what is literature, what is not, what is a book, what is not, how does one write about one's life. It becomes a lifelong quest for this 21-year-old would-be writer. So here's a note that I wrote. What is the relationship between the lives that one reads about in the books and the lives that one is leading? What is the connection between the way we live our lives and the ways in which people write about their own personal lives and the lives of their societies? If one knew the answers to these questions, perhaps it would allow one to think of himself or herself as a writer. If one knew the answers to these questions, one would have for sure a theory of writing. And having a life, as everyone does, and having a theory of writing, which presumably every writer has, would allow a young person to go ahead and put into words the essence of the life that he and his society seem, to him or to her, to be leading. In this case, the main character has a triangle of thought in his mind. Number one, he has his own life experience up to now. Number 2, he has the great books that he's reading and feels drawn to as capturing the essence of the lives of the great writers. And number 3, he has a sense that if he can just read enough about literature, the theories of the literary critics, he might be able to understand how the experiences that he has had could be turned into literature, a rendering in ink and paper of the essence of his own and his fellows' lives. As the novel ends, he's still puzzling out the solution to what might well turn out to be a lifelong task. Well, the title is A Theory of Writing of this video. Perhaps it could have been No Theory of Writing, but it's the beginning of a search for a theory of writing. So, in a sense, it's a detective story with no solution. At the same time, the name at the top of the novel, John Passfield, is 21-year-old and a would-be writer. Name at the bottom is John Passfield, a 75-year-old last year when I wrote the novel, who is a writer. So there's a solution, but it's not within that particular novel. Well, again, John Passfield, Saturday Morning. It's available on Amazon. You can find more information there. It's available at my publisher's website, rocksmillspress.com, rocksmillspress.com. There's also more information at my website, johnpassfield, all one word, .ca. 2 books, 2 free books. A planning notebook, you just click on the icon, it comes up on your screen. A full-length book of how I planned and wrote the novel. Another one is a journal. You click on that icon for Saturday Morning. That's a whole book of me reflecting on the novel as I was polishing it after I had a complete rough draft. What is this novel? What do I do in future as a writer? So those are available just by clicking on the icons at johnpassfield.ca. And lastly, I'll just say thank you for watching this video.